for me, it's a delightful thing to see that Moses is an illustration from beginning to end of God's provision and raising up of a person. I mean, God's provision for what would become Israel, for Israel's need, as she had become captive in Egypt. Joseph paved the way for his entire family to come to Egypt. And they would eventually be there for 430 years. But a deliverer would have to be raised up. And God did this by preparing a baby. And that baby was Moses. And we're familiar with the story of how Pharaoh's daughter spied him in the bulrushes along the river there. And so she knew right away that this was a Hebrew baby. And the reason she knew that because her father had decreed that all male babies should be killed. Well, here was one that had whose parents were trying to circumvent the will of her father. But anyway, she claimed it. And so in time, he would come into the household, Pharaoh's household, and receive the best education of the day. And that would be critical for what would happen in Moses' life. But then things took a turn for Moses. He entered into the defense of a Hebrew, and he killed the Egyptian who was maltreating the Hebrew. And then word got out that this had happened, and so Moses had to flee from Egypt and went to Midian. And the Bible speaks of his being on the backside of the desert for 40 years. And it wasn't just a matter of cooling his heels, but for conditions to be made right. And those 40 years that Moses would be in the wilderness or in the desert, he would be learning its ways because he was shepherding sheep all that while. And later on, he would be using all the understanding and wisdom that he had gained from that sojourn in the wilderness or desert to guide the children of Israel. So, that period of his preparation comes to an end with the burning bush incident. At the burning bush, Moses drew aside and wondered, well, why in the name of sense isn't this bush consumed? And then out of that bush came a voice and told him to put off his shoes or sandals because he was standing on holy ground. And from there, Moses got his calling to go and set free the children of Israel, who had been in captivity for about 430 years. They weren't captive all that while because initially they were a people of favor because of Joseph. But the Bible says there arose a Pharaoh who did not know Joseph. And things began to be difficult for the children of Israel. No matter, they grew to a nation of about 2.5 million people and were now ready for deliverance. And so Moses comes, and he has his struggle with Pharaoh and with the different plagues that are designed, well, to show the powerlessness of the gods of Egypt, then ultimately to persuade Pharaoh to let the children of Israel go. And so that eventually happens. And with the crossing of the Red Sea, and then with Pharaoh's army being drowned as they tried to follow the children of Israel through the Dead Sea. I just suspect I wouldn't have done that, but anyway, that's hindsight, and I'm sure they were thinking, if those those Hebrew slaves, if they could make it through there, we ought to be able to make it through there with our chariots. But God caused the wheels to fall off of those chariots, and so that was not good. At least it wasn't good for the Hebrews. I mean, for the Egyptians. So this was done. God had, in that calling to Moses at the burning bush, he was given the word that he was to give to Pharaoh: "Let my people go." And so eventually, Pharaoh lets his people go, lets God's people go, and then they get to the other side. They're in the wilderness, and the children of Israel were reluctant to proceed in. And Moses tried to do his best to make the way simple and clear. But the children of Israel wanted this report from the spies. And so 12 guys were sent in, and 10 of them came back with a negative report. And only 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, had a positive report. And as a result of the 10 guys having the negative report, the children of Israel refused to go in to the land. And so ultimately they would be there for 40 years until that generation died off that believed the report of the 10 spies. Now, through all this, I'm trying to use Moses' life as an illustration to say that God is a human resources officer who just won't quit. He makes us while we're in the womb, and knew us even before we were in the womb, and that's a little hard for us to get hold of. But anyway, he puts us together, and then he calls us, even as he called Moses. And Jesus called the disciples, and he said, you've not chosen me, from John 15:16. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain, and that whatsoever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it you. That hasn't changed. That principle hasn't changed. I know for myself, when I was converted, I was also called to preach. That's June the 19th, 1955. And I formally started preaching in 1960 and have been at it more or less ever since. And even this presentation is an extension of that call that came in 1955. I was 17 years of age at the time. Now, you do the math. Well, you don't have to do the math. I'll tell you, I'm 80 years of age. And all that means, it's a number. It doesn't mean that I'm an old man. It means that I have seen a lot, but there's a lot I haven't seen, and a lot I've got to learn. But what I have learned, and at least some of it, I'd like to share with you. There may be some folk out there who don't know as much as I do. Lord have mercy on you. But anyway, I'm learning, and I'm interested to learn. I'm interested to learn about the Jewishness of our gospel, its foundation, and there are a lot of people don't appreciate our history that way. But I hope in coming days to share things that you may not know, or may confirm you in what you do know, or if you don't agree with it, I would encourage you to be like Scarlett O'Hara and Gone with the Wind. I'll think about that tomorrow. So good to be with you. Blessings on you now. Bye-bye for today.